Do you think you can be a consultant? At this month's Business Blend, we'll look at what it takes to make this a lucrative and valuable business. So join us for this month's Business Blend.
So about me, I've worked for years. I lived in San Diego. I worked for a defense contractor down there for 19 years. Learned a lot of stuff, met a lot of people. We developed a lot of new technology, optical systems. Adam was talking about the lasers and that stuff. A lot of it was going on military aircraft. Really interesting stuff. Required the design of a lot of precise little parts that go together and operate in these assemblies. When that whole time working there was always consultants. They were usually really expert in their area, charismatic, professional, energetic, outspoken about a lot of things. That's what they're hired to do, is to be outspoken and to address the problems. And the consultants that I knew tended to be people who really wanted to stay in the trenches and keep doing the engineering work, maybe achieve a higher level of pay. One person I talked to, or maybe it even applies to a few more, said that they just like to be paid for when they did more than 40 hours of work in a week. They didn't want to be on a salary. They just wanted to keep getting paid if they worked 60 plus hours a week. The real ideal for a consultant should be to come in and assist in solving a specific problem that a company has. If you're a consultant, your customer, they bring you on because they need you in that moment. They've hit the wall in some way. They're going out into some area that they haven't been into before, and it's a little outside their area of expertise. They've even gotten to a point where their own employees, the people that they've trusted and they've hired and trained, they feel like they don't even necessarily have the ability to get to that next step. And so the consultant is really there to unblock those people and to help them through whatever they're facing now and get them on to the next thing. And so the value proposition for the consultant's got to be something like, what you pay me will be greatly exceeded by the earnings or the savings that you get from my intervention, my hopefully brief intervention. But one thing that makes us different from just working a normal job is that you have to have some amount of business acumen. And this is what I've really had to pick up. And one of the things that I've actually found to be some of the most enjoyable aspect of this, I had no background in business. I think having a background in business is a great idea. Having a degree, but I've just had to kind of pick up and learn a lot of this stuff. Here in Washington, it's pretty easy to establish an LLC. Go online, fill out some forms, pay a couple $100. You can get your UBI number, Universal Business Identifier. You can go to the IRS. You can get an employer identification number. You can get a bank account. You can get credit cards. You can get pretty far without a whole lot of money. A big part of this also is risk. By going from being an employee of a place to being a consultant or going your own, it's this thing. It's risk. A surprising piece of advice I got right off the bat was to keep yourself healthy. Eat well, try to stay in shape a little bit, avoid getting injured or sick if you possibly can, because once you're on your own, you don't qualify for disability insurance anymore. If you get sick, you're kind of in some trouble, Same thing goes for unemployment. If you work for a place and that place goes out of business, if you're employed traditionally, you get unemployment. The state pays you part of your income. You get floated along until you find your next job. They don't have that when you go on as soon as you get your first earnings in a small business, you're done until you go back and you're permanently employed for 12 months. I had to carry business general liability insurance. Depending on the nature of the business, everybody's got to probably carry some amount of insurance. I don't know, maybe it's if somebody came into my office and hurt themselves, or if I hurt somebody at a work site or something. You want to try to mitigate some of this risk, because it is scary. You could easily just get completely buried by a lawsuit. Nobody starts a business thinking, oh, I'm going to lose everything in this business, but it could. I've heard some horror stories from people. Yeah, it could happen. Sometimes I also get a request for errors and omissions insurance. Like that's if I make a bad engineering decision and the product hurts somebody, kills somebody, it fails in the marketplace, those kind of things. And that's been really difficult to get. That's probably really difficult for an insurer to underwrite that. We talked a few times on Business Blend, and maybe a couple of Joe too, about what we're trying to do with these LLCs. I have an LLC, limited liability company, and a big part of that is to try to create a barrier between yourself and your business liability, your own personal liability, and your business liability. And my understanding from listening to all these talks has been that the more that the business appears to be a real independent entity, the more likely that is to hold up in court if you were to get into trouble that way. So so all the rules that you might come across apply. It's a good idea to have a business charter. Good idea to have a lot of records of what you're doing. Keep a lot of things in writing. Keep a separate bank account. Keep the finances completely separate from your personal finances. Those are things I think are all really very important. Oh yeah, retirement's another thing. You want to save for your retirement. It's easy to forget. You got to do this on your own. You can put probably for most of us this year, you could put $7,000 into a Roth IRA or a traditional IRA. You want to do more than that, you've got to find other ways to invest your money. All these things, to me, it's been really kind of exciting to be part of, just to be in the mix with all that, because all these years I worked for an employer, and I had presumably some total compensation package, which included my pay, my benefits, all these things that were all part of this. But my pay was just one little piece of it that came to me in my paycheck. And then there's a bunch of lines where they were taking money out to do different things with them. And yeah, whatever. Just kind of go from one paycheck to the next, not really thinking too much about that. It's been really neat to be in the weeds with all that. And even though it takes a lot of time to really be more involved with where's all this money going to. And even if it is a lot more expenses, with this work, you charge a high hourly rate. And you have to charge a high enough hourly rate that it will cover all those expenses. Just finally about risk. Most of the consultants I've known have been older people. They have a lot of expertise. They've had a long time in the field. A lot of them are married with no kids, or the kids have moved out. The spouse has a job. They already have a house. They have a lot of things. They have kind of a bedrock going, a big safety net under themselves for the ups and downs of business. And so, yeah, that's kind of the typical person that I've seen doing this, and that's for a reason, So who can be classified as an employee versus who can be classified as an independent consultant or independent contractor? You could see the possibility for abuse with this. If a big company could just go out and get a bunch of young people to sign their rights away and say, oh yeah, you're an independent contractor or whatever, and yeah, you don't get any unemployment or disability or anything, no benefits, nothing. And if they use that so that they could not play by the normal rules and undercut their competitors and make a bunch of money off of that, that's not so great. But it has made it pretty difficult to get consulting jobs, because there's a lot of, I see it here in Washington too, where there's a lot of nerves about, is this person really be considered an employee? And I think the employers themselves have a lot of incentive to call people an employee. They're employers, they have employees. If they have work to be done, they want the employees to do that work. They hired them, they picked them out of a crowd and said, you're qualified to work here. So their tendency is to believe that their employees can do the job. And so what I see a lot is these qualifications they don't want you to be under the direct day-to-day supervision of their management. And that they don't want, and if you're being asked to work regular hours is another thing. These days, especially in this work, the protection of intellectual property and data security, that's completely paramount to all my customers. And so a lot of times they're like, well, there's really no way you can do this on your own computer, so we'll have to ship you a computer, and then you'll have to log in through our VPN. And so, once you're working on their computer, under their managers, attending meetings at hours that they tell you to attend, you start to look a little bit like an employee. And so this is a difficult thing. But if they were to offer you a job and it was going to pay you really well, maybe you just take that job. That can be pretty tempting, and so can the contract like temp jobs that come up, right? You know, work 11 months. Sometimes they pay really well, and they're pretty tempting, and I've done it, and I've seen this too with the consultants that I've known, is they kind of go back and forth between the W-2 jobs and the 1099 jobs. So, you know, for me, living here on the Palouse, which is, you know, not exactly the center of technology and industry, it's a beautiful place. You know, having this business and I think has been a really great vehicle for me to like gain access to those jobs and stay in there, and most importantly, to contribute. I think like it can be so rewarding, this idea that I could, you know, influence so many people or make an impact, make a, you know, like I was saying, like help unblock people when they're stuck, just because of what I know how to do. To do this, to be a consultant, you have to be an expert. They say that you have to put 10,000 hours into anything to achieve mastery over it. You have to play piano or to be a plumber or whatever. You have to achieve that like depth and breadth of experience, right? The depth is like, when, you know, for my mind anyway, just doing the same task over and over and over again. So it's so, you know, just repetitively driven into your mind to where it just becomes a level of fluency and comfort with the work that you're doing. And then the breadth of experience is when you've seen all of, you know, what we call in engineering the edge cases and the corner cases, all the good, bad, and ugly. You've seen all the weird stuff too. If I'm unsure about myself, you know, or if I'm out of my lane, or, you know, they're asking me something I don't really know about, hey, I just don't really know that. I mean, I know the things that I know. I can help you out with that. If I don't know it, I'm just going to say that. I'm not going to go out on a limb and be risky in that way. I feel like I see things that other people don't see right away. I come to conclusions pretty fast, and so I think these are things you just can't fake. And so if you're like 24 years old, or you know, you're just out of college, just in the beginning of your career or something, maybe don't worry about this consulting thing for now. You know, maybe as we say, hitch your wagon to a strong organization, and where you agree it's a good place to work, and you like the products. And you can get some good mentorship and experience. I think that's the way to go for a real long time. The other thing about working a job for a long time is you make all these connections. You meet all these people. You can build a network of people who trust you, and that becomes the people that are going to help you find another a contract job in the future. So I feel like I'm a really good like engineering designer, mechanical engineer. But where people really need my help is these engineering drawings. And so this has been kind of my calling card for a little while now. So this would be like a drawing of a precision aluminum part, be like made on a milling machine, be machined. This is, I think this is a one-to-one view, so you can see how big it is. It's got all these notes and a bunch of technical stuff on there. So any part like that is going to have geometric requirements. So it's got to be made to a certain level of quality, otherwise it's just not going to work, it's not going to function well. The other parts that attach to it aren't going to line up and attach just right. So we know that we can't get a part made perfectly. So we have to be able to say how much deviation from perfect can we tolerate? And that's where tolerance comes in. And I'm a geometric dimensioning and tolerancing professional is my whole thing. So this tolerance for error, or tolerance for deviation, however you want to think about it. I don't even like to think about it as error, because it's fine. It's not an error if it's made within the tolerance. For most people, for many people, that begins and ends with this little symbol plus or minus. So if I ask for somebody to make a part, and this is 9 inches in one dimension, plus or minus 0.03, 30 thousandths of an inch, 9 plus or minus 30 thousandths, by 5 plus or minus 30 thousandths. And I send this out to a machine shop and I say, hey, can you make me this part? And they come back a couple weeks later and say, oh man, we did a great job for you. We did way better than plus or minus 30 thousandths on this part. We got down to where one of these dimensions is, this one's plus or minus, this one's 9 6 thousandths, and this one is 4.998. But you can see that this is like a funky parallelogram, right? And so when I go to put it on my assembly, it doesn't fit right. And I say, this is terrible. When I measure it like end to end, kind of squared with this long edge, it's way outside of the 9 inches plus or minus 30 tolerance. And yeah, I want my money back. I don't want to pay for this part. And they say, well, you know, we made it according to the drawing. That whole plus or minus tolerance thing is just not a very sophisticated way to communicate tolerance. And so we have these other things. We can, once we start adding some of these other symbols, like these, now I have these dimensions in these funny boxes. I have a weird little symbol, this is like a datum feature symbol they call this, and I put a profile tolerance, and this little circle means this profile applies all around. Well, the interpretation of this would be that my part has a nominal geometry, which is the 5x9 rectangle, and then all around that 5x9 rectangle, there's this tolerance zone. And the tolerance zone is 60 thousandths wide, 30 thousandths in each direction. So every part of the perimeter, every element of the perimeter of that part has to be inside that tolerance zone. And so you really couldn't get the parallelogram. Or if you did get the parallelogram, it would have to be within the bounds of that tolerance. These drawings are the main way of communicating between the engineers and the fabricators what they want out of these parts. When you lack the tools to communicate those requirements to your suppliers, you get kind of stuck. And if I can help people like develop their tools of communication in that way and make better drawings, more accurate callouts, like the callouts that more accurately describe the actual needs of the part, then it can really unblock people. And I've seen people, myself included, become just much better mechanical designers as well as a result of that. Okay, so we like to do the activities at Business Blend. These are all just questions either from the perspective of the customer or from the perspective of the consultant that you might that might come up in this, and they're all about the how do we get the jobs, how do we make sure it's a value, how do we manage the risks and liabilities, and then the last question is about what's attractive or unattractive about hiring consultants, and then what would be attractive or unattractive about being a consultant. I just thought that each table, maybe with the note cards, could just take on one or two of these questions from either or both perspectives. In like 5 minutes or something, or a couple minutes, we'll come back and just read them out. And then I'll tell you a little bit about how I address some of these questions in my business. This table, you guys seem really energetic. What'd you come up with?
Yeah, sure. We were just talking about how do I create value. Some of our ideas are like pre-consultations, like what are you giving away to your potential client for free? Maybe you could put together a value package in a sense, an ebook, something that shows them that you have the skill, but also doesn't require them to spend money right away. Also, the credibility, of course, is like professional-looking websites, whatever it takes to, kind of the obvious stuff. The other thing is like, how big is your network in a sense? Because maybe they want to hire you, but maybe you don't know the answer. But if you have a big network, then maybe you already know someone who does know the answer.
So if I start a conversation with a potential customer, the first thing we always do is we have this non-disclosure agreement that comes out, and probably some of you are familiar with those from other contexts. I have one that I've got for myself. Usually this comes from the customer, though. They usually have attorneys and a contracts department, and so this is to protect their rights in those conversations. And there usually are a few phone calls and Zoom calls and discussions. For me as the consultant, I'm trying to move towards a contract, because that's when I start getting paid. And if I'm not doing that, then I'm just doing a charity thing, right? But sometimes it does take going down that road quite a bit of demonstrating to them that you have some understanding of the project. So they want to do an NDA so that they can start to tell me some of the details of this project and still feel like it's protected. And so, but then I'll end up writing a proposal. Always going to have a cover letter, an extremely gracious cover letter where I make a value proposition and a statement of qualifications. So I say my value proposition. I've looked over your project, what you've showed me. I think I can contribute concretely in these ways. I know I can do this, And then I say that I'm qualified to do it as well, that I have the skills that are required to do this work for you. Sometimes I write a proposal and I'll list out like what I think each stage of the project is going to cost, and then they start to see those numbers. And sometimes I've worked with like inventors and people who want to do a little product development, and they start to see like, oh, okay, this is starting to look like thousands of dollars to me. And I'm like, hey, this project that you're undertaking, the parts and the tooling and the manufacturing, this is going to be like hundreds of thousands of dollars by the end of it. So if you're nervous about my $3,000 or $10,000, you might want to really consider what it takes to develop a product. And so some things like really shake out in this process too. Yeah, I don't do overtime too much, but all the moving goalposts are super important. And so in the proposal, I always include in my quotation. I kind of learned this early on, but to break up the quotation into several objectives, and they can be pretty granular. Just a few hours per each objective, and then each objective has a deliverable. Okay, and the deliverable doesn't actually have to even be a physical object, or sometimes it can just be like a report. So I write like these, I write like a report every Friday, a weekly report of what I worked on, and sometimes it'll say something like, I did X, Y, and Z, this completes the deliverable for objective 2. And I'm saying just as clear as day, like I consider objective 2 to be done now, and we put that one away. And if they disagree, they can come back and say something about it. But what I want to do is move through these. And sometimes it does require renegotiating the statement of work. But say I write a proposal that's got a cover letter on it. It looks like the CIA wrote this because I redacted a lot of it, thinking I was going to pass it around. But then my quotation would include a whole bunch of things about how I expect to be paid, what kind of contract it is, everybody's address, and then I go through all these work objectives. And there's an estimate for how many hours each objective is going to take, an estimate, and then how much time it's going to take for me to do each one of those things, and then quite a bit of detail about what I plan to do in each one of those. And sometimes, if you start to get too far away from this, or if I feel like I'm starting to get too far away from this, I ask for that to be renegotiated. We need to renegotiate the statement of work. If I do a good job in the proposal, a lot of times what I find is that once it goes through my customer's legal department, my proposal is stapled to the back, or it's attached to the back of the contract. So now the contract has, the statement of work is this, and then, oh, there's my document. That's important. And then I do so much work to maintain good timekeeping. I made myself a nice timesheet, and I do a lot of time reporting. All those objectives, I assign them a different number and a descriptor. And so I can tell my customer, here's the hours I spent on each one of those objectives for each week. And they can see all that piling up as it goes into an invoice at the end of the month. And so it's just, when it comes to that stuff, when things start to creep out, with the reports and the time cards and everything, if you can't renegotiate the SAL every single time everything changes, at least do so much transparency that they know, hey, we're slipping on this. We're charging more than what we said. But I want you to know about it. If you're okay with it, then we're okay with it. If you're not okay with it, tell me to stop and I'll stop.